course, our activities involve different stakeholders like European Commission, African Union, academia as well, and so on. Basically, we have our mission, which is divided in three parts. First of all, advocacy for the private sector, for the African private sector towards European policymakers, advocacy for the EU private sector towards African policymakers, and of course, as a Chamber of Commerce, providing business services to our members. So we have, in order to achieve this mission, a strategy in 4 pillars. The first one is organization of high-level conference or workshop or event in order to facilitate those relationships between policymakers and the private sector. The second pillar is information and communication. We mentioned some funds available for private sector. So often there are some funds that are available in Europe, for example, targeted at African private sector, but African private sector is not aware of that. So basically, our goal is to promote and to make this information available. We have, of course, networking event, business services, and lastly but not least is specific programs that we are developing, for example, corporate social responsibility. So let's focus now on the subject, sustainable business with Africa, relationship with Africa. So I'll try to bring some insight and from our, short experience dealing with the private sector in Africa and especially SMEs. So when we talk about the context, we know all that Africa is rising. It's obvious, but there are some hidden facts. And when you visit some African countries, you find that, first of all, there are some inequalities between them, between those countries. But also, those nice figures of growth are not translated locally in how people live in the living conditions. So where are the problem actually? So we can see that through different perspectives, talking about workforce, local communities, product services, markets, environment, and so on. So let's focus on some of those domains. When talking, for example, about products and services, in order to have African products on international markets, those products need to meet some standards in order to be, accessible to European consumers. So now we can already identify some issues in terms of capacity building, in terms of meeting standards, in terms of competitivity of African products on the international market. This is very important. Our colleague mentioned the Economic Partnership Agreement. This is a very good framework, but it's also an opportunity to push African products to be more competitive. We can have think about historical links. If you look in Africa, you can see a difference between French-speaking countries and English-speaking countries. And this is important to take into consideration. Why, for example, English-speaking countries are more proactive, more dynamic than French. Sometimes we can explain that from historical reasons. It's important to take into account. Another thing is basic services that often are not accessible in Africa. So when you are a European company coming and dealing with companies having difficulties to access to energy, to various basic services, of course, these affect the business relationship. So it's important to take this into account and see how basically those business relationships can be accommodated to that. Another thing which is not often mentioned is the pyramid of needs. When you have people that don't have yet, fulfilled needs in terms of food, in terms of security, in terms of place of living, it's difficult for them to talk about businesses. Of course, here I mentioned mainly SMEs. So it's important to understand who we are in front of us. What is the framework? What is the social pressure that our African business leaders are facing? And this will help to understand their attitude in a business relationship. We can mention also the law framework which is evolving with, for example, the Ouattara, which is actually a framework for business law which facilitates, I would say businesses. and improve security for various actors. You can mention governance as well, but I will just pick up some important topics. When talking about economy, finance, and politics, reliable local partners. You want to do business in Africa, you need to find reliable partners. They know the network, they know how people think, they know the rationale behind, and it's important to go through local partners instead of directly go and exploring Africa for doing business. Another thing is access to information. Access to business information is difficult, and then most of the case the information is not up to date, is not reliable. So it's important to work, of course, with local chambers of commerce, but also directly private sector actors, and make sure that information you have is, of high quality in order to plan doing business in Africa. Another major point is access to finance. Companies in Africa are willing to do business. There are huge business opportunities, but also access to finance is difficult. Why? Simply because the financial sector in several countries are not very dynamic. You have businesses that are, companies have identified business opportunities. They want to seize those opportunities. They apply for a loan, for example, within a financial institution. It takes 4 months, 6 months before having a feedback. This is not acceptable for a business. And of course, in terms of business partnership, you expect your partner to bring something on the table. And this is what we are promoting, is equal to equal partners. So European companies come, they put money on the table, and they expect as well their counterpart, the African counterpart, to put money on the table. But those face some issues with finance. But this is as well an opportunity. That means you can provide financial services in Africa. You can put pressure on the financial institution in Africa and let them providing financial services that actually meet the needs. Let's also give some insights on the political relationship between countries. Affects a lot how businesses will actually be set up in terms of collaboration. We have some countries that refrain the relationship, for example, with France, and now starting relationship with Russia. And there is those, I would say, conflicts or tension between those Western countries reflect directly in the relationship you can have with local businesses. So here it's a responsibility of the policy makers in Europe and in Africa to take this into account. How our political relationship can facilitate business relationship between our both private sector. Another point which is important as well is, of course, culture, religion. Those are important aspects to take into account when you do business in Africa. For example, in some country, in Mali, there is time for prayer. They just stop and they go to pray. So if you are not used to those habits, it will be difficult for you to understand that. And also competition. There is a need for more entrepreneurship spirit in Africa. Basically there is no those social benefits. So if you don't have a job, if you are not a businessman, you don't have revenue. So basically, I can say a lot of people are entrepreneurs, but there is a need for capacity building. What is entrepreneurship? Sometimes someone starts a business, others around see that the business is doing well, and they all jump in the same sector. So this is something that needs to be improved, I would say, and to make a healthy competition in Africa. So to summarize, some things to keep in mind is, first of all, partners. Look for partners who knows Africa. This will reduce the risk you are taking, and this will help you as well to have counterparts that can work on an equal, I would say, relationship. Another point is government. It's important to work closely with government. Even on public administration side, there are huge needs, and of course, these are opportunities that you can seize. Another thing is risk. You cannot wait until Africa will have a secure investment environment. If you wait, then you will lose, near other investors like Asian or other continents. So it's important to take business actions in Africa as you are facing some challenges. There are risks, of course, but those risks need to be mitigated. So it's important to be, I would say, more proactive and take the necessary actions in order to limit the risk. Margins are higher, of course, doing business in Africa, but as well risks are higher. So if some European company want more margin and more business, it's important to take more risk and find a way to mitigate those risks. And lastly, it's important to see doing business in Africa as a long-term action. Some companies have focus on opportunities. Well, it's good, you can have good deals, one shot, but it's important to invest in long-term relationship. We, from the Chamber of Commerce, we have two main programs we have initiated. So, Impact Investment and Corporate Social Responsibility in Africa Awards. Basically, this program aims at rewarding responsible business actions in Africa from foreign actors, but as well for African actors. We have also launched recently Access Fin program, which is actually to matchmake businesses with finance institution or investor. There is a lot of interesting projects, and the idea is to only retain those are bankable. So basically, there are investment opportunities in Africa, there are reliable actors, so the way is open, but of course the support from institutions like the European Commission or African institution is very useful, as well as private sector organization, in order to make those relationships successful, especially in the long term. So thank you for your attention.